Welcome to episode 7 of the Viking Voices podcast. It's cold out there today. The roads are not agreeing, but we made it in here in the studio with Mark Potts today. Mark, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, appreciate it, Jaden. Glad to be here. And you're right. It is cold out there. Winter has arrived. Snow is on the ground, and it's here.
Well, and it's supposed to warm up, but if you ever question the dedication we have to putting this podcast out, you can't question it anymore because we're getting in the car at, well, I'm a Celsius guy, but we're getting in below freezing and wiping the windshield off. But yeah, Mark, good to be here with you today.
You know what the real dedication is, Jaden? It's being here the Monday after Thanksgiving.
That's very true.
That is one of the toughest days, I think, for students and even employees around the country. It's just like...
Yeah, all that food, all that good time with family, and then you throw 5 inches of snow on top,
right?
And
then
worse.
You're looking forward to Christmas break and holiday break in 3 weeks. So
someone was telling me that this is the toughest 3 weeks of the year for them.
I'd agree
because you're right in the middle of that Thanksgiving break, and then it's the home stretch here, and it's exam time, but. Yeah.
But yeah, you just come back from a nice long break where you see family, friends, and now you got to get back to the grind for 3 more weeks before you get that second break. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, we're all going to earn it, but Mark, I'd love you just to introduce yourself. I know I've gotten to know you really well, obviously playing baseball. Well, now you're kind of my boss, if you will. But for the people that don't, just kind of where you're from, what you do on campus, and you're a VCSU graduate, correct?
No. Actually,
okay, well then you're going to have to tell us about that too.
Sure. So yeah, obviously Mark Potts, current role, Director for Public Relations. That's a new role for me as of about 3 months ago. This summer I took that position, and to break it down, essentially I'm in charge of the marketing and communications department on campus, right? Ad placements, social media, website, photography, graphic design, all that stuff kind of runs through me. We have a team of people, obviously, that they are responsible for those certain areas, but I'm kind of in charge and oversee all of that. Prior to that, I was here for, about 11 years as sports information director, and then the last couple as assistant athletic director, and so just made the transition from athletics to general campus marketing this past summer.
Right on. And so how has that transition been? Obviously, athletics is very, very hands-on, I'd imagine, game day operations and stuff like that. So how has that transition been for you?
It's been interesting. We'll put it that way. Athletics has been such a huge part of my life. I grew up on a dairy farm south of here, Verona, North Dakota, about 40 miles. And I just knew from a certain age I wanted to be involved in sports, right? So at a certain point it was, I want to be a sports broadcaster. Then it was, I want to be a sports writer. And that's, where my career initially took me, right? I was sports editor for the Valley City Times-Record newspaper here for about 3.5 years. And then I moved into broadcasting. I worked at the radio stations in Valley City and Jamestown for about 1.5 years, including the last year as a sports broadcaster, calling all the VCSU and Highliner games in Valley City. And then opportunity to work in sports information came up, and it was just a good fit. I took that and haven't looked back. I was here, I think, 11 years in that role before that transition. And yeah, sports has been such a big part of my life, so that transition it's been interesting, right? Stepping back from what I've been doing for so long, but I think in some ways I've regained a little bit of my passion for athletics, right? When you work in it day in, day out, you see some things, you get a little jaded, you work in sports all day long, then you get home and you maybe don't care about your other professional teams as much just because you want to step back from sports for the night and spend the weekend, doing something other than athletics. So I think I've noticed that already, just not be involved in the day-to-day. I've kind of refound my passion a little bit for the professional teams that I like to follow. So that's been good. And then, the hours are better. It's different, not as many nights and weekends.
That's right.
Athletics is very heavy on that, as you well know. It's 8-9 hour days at the baseball field when you get a doubleheader.
Yep.
And then you turn around and do it again the next day.
Yeah. Or you're traveling down 4.5 hours to, where was it last year?
Oh yeah, where did we go? Mitchell, South Dakota?
Yeah, Mitchell.
Right?
I was gonna say Madison, but no, Mitchell. And I was like, I look up in the booth and you're there and I'm like, what is he doing down here? And it was cold like this.
Oh, brutal.
Terrible. But yeah, I can see how that would take a toll.
Yeah, it was midweek games, right? That got changed at the last minute. We knew no parents were going to make it. So we made the decision, let's go down and broadcast it for them, right? And then driving back, I didn't stay over the extra night like you guys did and came back in the middle of a snowstorm, Oh, that drive was long.
Yeah, sports will take you everywhere. So let's get into I was going to ask you this later, but now since you brought it up, who are your teams? I want to know because I know you're a sports guy, and I'm a sports guy too.
Very local. I can't say I'm original in that, but
Okay.
yeah, it's Minnesota Vikings, Minnesota Twins. Those are the big ones, right? That I follow and cheer for. And in NBA, I've fallen off a little bit, but huge Timberwolves fan as a kid, and it's nice to see them, be competitive again the last couple of years. So
they had a
back
good
into
run
that.
last year.
Yep. And Wild. I'm not huge into hockey, but when they make the playoffs. Playoff hockey is fun to watch. I'm not going to lie. So Minnesota Wild there. And my mom grew up in Colorado Springs. So we've also, we follow some of the Colorado teams pretty closely. Denver Broncos and Colorado Rockies. Yeah. But yeah, I can't say I'm original. I'm very, very heavy on the Minnesota side of things. I was just having that discussion with my brother-in-law this weekend over Thanksgiving, how, in North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, that area, you can kind of pick and choose what you want. You don't have to be a Vikings fan. You don't have to be a Broncos fan. You don't have a home loyalty to anyone. But, yeah, I did go with the local Minnesota route.
Big time. No, 100%. That's the interesting thing about the Midwest is there's so little. I mean, you got your college teams. You obviously got NDSU and all that, but there's so little professional sports in the Midwest so that, your loyalties can be split state to state or whatnot, and that's quite cool. But I'm like you. I'm a local guy as well. Edmonton Oilers, obviously.
Yeah, I grew up in, mid 90s, right? Really heavy on sports. So that was Randy Moss, rookie year for the Minnesota Vikings. Him and Randall Cunningham. That was a pretty magical year up until the end. And then Minnesota Timberwolves was Kevin Garnett era. Stephon Marbury, Tom Gugliotta, those guys. So
my gosh,
it was. You paid a lot more attention as a kid, and I even noticed it now in my son. He's 10 and really got into football cards the last couple of years, right? So he's spouting off stats and information about players that I had no idea.
Yeah,
him and my nephew were quizzing each other this weekend on, where did this guy go to college? Harrison Smith, where did he play college at, and things like that. So
yeah, that's the fun stuff. That's always fun with your friends, just going around and talking sports. And I had more sports questions. If we're going to talk about sports, might as well talk sports. You were talking about some of the eras, some of the players that you were watching. What are some of the special moments you got to watch when you were a kid, or even now?
Yeah, I think a lot of them would be VCSU memories, just because when you work in athletics, it means a little bit more, right? In some way you're a part of that team and you're a part of that school. So it means a little bit more than just being a fan. I was telling a class the other day. I went and spoke to a sports leadership class and coaching, and one of my top moments, maybe the top moment, was 2011 women's basketball Dakota Athletic Conference championship game. So the DAC tournament. I was working at the newspaper at that time as a sports editor, and our team hosted the DAC Conference championship game against Jamestown, the rival. I've never seen the inside of the bubble like that since. Like, that was a special night, just packed and loud, and just the excitement throughout that game. Obviously, VCSU ended up winning, rushed the floor. First time they qualified for the national tournament in program history. So that was just a really special night. And then I got to see it come a little bit full circle this past fall, because that team got inducted into the VCSU Hall of Fame.
That's right.
And so I did the video for that, and going through and reading some of my old articles as I did some research, and seeing those old players that I used to cover so closely come back and be recognized as inducted into the Hall of Fame. That's a pretty cool feeling and pretty cool moment to be a part of. Thursday night paint bucket games against Jamestown, those are something special.
Of course.
Anybody who's experienced that, it's different. I'll paint bucket games, obviously, and you hear old timers talk about their paint bucket games. They were something special too. But recently, those Thursday night ones, first week of school, it's just field is just ringed 5-10 deep with people. 3,000 people at that game, which that's a lot for us. And
it's half the town.
Oh yeah, those are some pretty cool memories I have. Yep.
Big time. No, 100%. I'm with you on those paint bucket games, and definitely VCSU Athletics probably hits closer to home. I want to get in. I honestly did not know. I knew you were a broadcaster. Did not know you were a writer. Talk to me about that. I feel like that is almost a lost art now, with how much is kind of just on video and audio, kind of like this. There's Stephen A. Smith.
Right.
You see all these shows. Tell me kind of how that is, and maybe how it's changed over the course of the years here, because now you see more obviously online articles, how the information is acquired. So just talk about that real quick.
It takes time and effort to write a good story.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's where the changes come, but podcasts, I feel like they're easy, right? You just sit down and you talk,
They're
right?
very
You
easy.
shoot the breeze, And so, but to sit down and write a really good article, like that takes time, and it takes rewrites and drafts and edits. So it's definitely, I feel like, a little bit of a lost art, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the guys, he had a very casual, fan-sided style, Bill Simmons. He was one of the guys. He was writing for ESPN when I was growing up, and he's one that I really tried to model a lot of my columns, opinion pieces after a little bit. I just really enjoyed the way he wrote. But he also has transitioned to more of a podcast style now. So I don't keep in touch with his stuff as much anymore. So that's, I think, what you've seen. And there's still some of those old guys that still write really good columns, and I enjoy that. But yeah, it's definitely, I feel like it's a bit of a lost art. Everything is so, it's not attention spans have changed, but you want the information quick.
Right.
So to write a 400 to 500 word column, most people aren't getting to the end of that story.
That's right.
So you really got to be strategic now about putting your top information high in the story, what you want people to know, those first couple paragraphs, because there's no guarantee they're getting past that.
Right.
And then so much is a quick summary on social media. It's
big time, yes.
Yeah. Especially with sports information, right? We're not in the business of selling newspapers or needing to drive traffic to our website, right? Our job is to get the information out.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of, that top info goes out on social media with a nice graphic. People might click on the story, but they're not going all the way deep. So it's been a shift in, getting that information out. And I think long form writing is certainly not as popular or not as done as well as it was in the past.
Absolutely. No, that's 100% it. Like you said, the attention span or the entertainment factor. In an article, it's just the words, but you have a show like like characters like the Stephen A. Smith, like the Charles Barkley.
Right.
You want to watch the animation. You want to watch the back and forth. So definitely something. And I remember when I was growing up, they always had the hockey news, the magazines with every team's preseason kind of report.
Yep.
And that was my heaviest reading of just I loved how they wrote in there. So definitely, I used to be big into, you get the magazines at the store, what were they, 99 cents?
Yeah.
And they have that was awesome. But
fantasy football magazines.
That's right.
Can't tell you how many of those I bought back in the
Yes.
day. Yeah. Read up on the up and coming stars, who to pick first, all that. There's still a place for good writing, I think, especially when you talk about local newspapers.
Yes.
The Valley City Times-Record. Not many
Excellent.
people are out there covering the Valley City Highlanders or Valley City State University in newspaper print format, right? So if you do it well at a newspaper, that's how you can still drive readers to your paper, because there's nowhere else they're getting that content.
Big time. No, and I was even looking when I was back home for Thanksgiving. I live in a bigger city, so I was looking at our newspaper, and it's been slashed in half. There's not as much as far as articles. There was no sports section, so certainly something that has gone downhill quickly, at least in my hometown. But I think here they do a great job, and it's good coverage of everything. And whenever I see an edition in a coffee shop or something, I'll sit down and read it, because it's fun to pick up a newspaper from now and then and just have a read it. Whatever the article may be, it might not even be relevant to what I want to read, but it's still well done, and it's still something to read, and it's interesting.
And the reality is we don't get a whole lot of coverage from the bigger market like Fargo, right? Every once in a while we get a couple stories in the Fargo Forum. We get some television reporters out here every once in a while for stories or highlights. But at the end of the day, we're pretty lucky with our local media, between the newspaper, the Times-Record, and then KOVC Radio.
Yes.
They're the voice of the Vikings. They call all of our home athletic events for, most sports. So they do a great job, and they have their website where they do a lot of print coverage as well. So we are lucky with our local media, despite not getting the bigger coverage coming in. Locally, regionally, I think we do pretty well, and we're blessed with some of the media people we have.
I absolutely agree. The coverage is very good for even as myself and as an athlete. It's you see yourself in 3-4 articles sometimes a week, and it's wow, this is makes you feel special. But so moving on to the broadcast side, this is something I've got into the past, obviously, a little bit. This was not supposed to be part of the internship. The broadcasting was.
Things evolve.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so broadcasting. So you go from writing to broadcasting. Talk about that transition, because that is, like you said, drafts in writing. There's no drafts in broadcasting. You're
Yeah.
on the air.
Yeah.
What's out is out there. So talk about that transition.
Yeah, I've my whole life I feel like I've very much been a behind the scenes type person. So putting yourself front and center on a mic, like you're the guy, it's a bit much. It was a bit overwhelming to start with, but I was transitioned in a little bit. So I was hired away from the newspaper to be the news director at their Jamestown radio station. Now I3G Media is what it would be, and so there's been a transition. A lot of it was writing for their website, stuff that I had done before. But then I got into doing news hits, 2 to 3 minute newscasts that they would use. And then we started hosting a news show as well on the radio. And then from there, I transitioned into the sports broadcasting side. So it wasn't like a full-on, boom, now you're a full-time radio broadcaster, right? There was a lot of print writing or website writing before that. So I think that really helped me a lot. But, man, being a sports broadcaster, that was fun.
Yes.
I tell people that's the most fun I've ever had in a job is, getting paid to go out and call games. It was a blast.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I've been doing the same thing, and it's interesting. I've definitely, growing up, you kind of find your favorite announcers.
Yeah.
I know ours might be very different. I know for me it was Bob Cole, Hockey Night in Canada guy, unbelievable. And he just had such an interesting style, and it was a lot of people didn't like it, and a lot of people loved it. But the style is very different. And trying to find your own style, kind of. How did you find your own style as far as what worked, what didn't work? Did you have anything that you kind of thought, I'm gonna grab that from him? Any a specific line or something, or did you just kind of coin your own sort of style?
Yeah, I mean, growing up, Kevin Harlan was someone, he was the voice of the Timberwolves back when I was a kid. So he's still, a great broadcaster, great voice. So he was someone I looked up to. But yeah, I think when I got to the sports broadcasting, it was really just did my own stuff. I didn't want to tried not to be cliche, steal a signature line or signature phrase. The first couple months, you call a game and then you have to do the hard work of listening back.
It's the worst.
It's never fun to listen to yourself.
It's the worst.
Especially when you're not very good to start, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's you find critique, but that's how you learn. Oh man, I sounded silly when I said that, right? Let's just pull it back to basics. And I think that's kind of what I found is I just wanted to call the game, get excited in the appropriate moments, really try to be obviously you're a bit of a homer when you're, the Valley City State and the Valley City broadcaster. But I think I'd never wanted to be a blatant homer for that team. So you wanted to call a balanced game. You wanted to lay off the officials. You wanted to leave your opinions out of it. I think that's something I really tried to do was keep my opinions out of it and just describe the action, right? So if there's a coach that's upset with a foul call, you don't say that's a terrible call by the official, right? You just describe the action. Like, hey, head coach, the Vikings doesn't seem to be happy with that call, and the officials know that he thought it was, a bad call, right? Because you're describing the action and you're bringing that game into someone's home essentially through your voice. So I think that was one thing I really tried to be was just stay on the basics and describe what was happening.
And I think that was one of the first things that you told me when I originally approached you about broadcasting. You said you don't want the opinions, but you can kind of use the reaction of coaches or players as a bit of a vessel to kind of get what you're thinking out there. And I think that's something I use a lot of the time, because it also helps describe the emotion of the game.
Yeah,
is one team feel like they're being treated unfairly? I guess not treated, reffed against a little bit, or is one team think they're getting the calls? But it's interesting, what you can kind of facilitate, the way you call the game. How much information your listeners actually have about the game. So yeah, certainly an interesting kind of. It's an interesting job, really. Yeah. It's an interesting job because it's entertainment, but it's also just what's out there, what's happening.
Yeah. and I'm by no means an expert, right? I did it for a year and a half at the radio station, and then through those skills, I call a lot of VCSU games as needed on the video stream. It's been fewer the last couple of years because we've had some really good people step in and take that on. But yeah, one of the top moments I remember at the radio station, though, was our men's basketball team, VCSU at the time. They qualified for the national tournament that year. So we got to travel down to Branson, Missouri. At the time, it was 32-team national tournament. They played, 8 games first day, 8 games second day. So games started at 8:30 in the morning, and they went to like 10, 11 o'clock at night. Just a full slate of games, bam, 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 right? So our team actually drew one of the primetime games. Must have been about a 4:30, 5 o'clock start, but it was the game right before the opening ceremonies when all the teams come and they come out on the floor,
awesome.
right? And then right after the opening ceremonies, the host school, College of the Ozarks, was set to play. So all their fans from the town, all the teams from the tournament are at the second half of our game, and it's a close game. And I think we took a lead on a 3-pointer by Connie Milligan with about a minute and a half left. Ended up losing, I think, by 2 points. Just a blast. Such a fun atmosphere. A lot of national tournament games, there's maybe 100 fans for each side there, and sometimes it's maybe not the best atmosphere, but this was something else. That place was packed, and teams and the casual fan, eventually they pick a side. One team or the other. So it got to be pretty fun. That's one of my top broadcasting memories.
When you're a sports fan, it's hard not to pick a side.
Exactly.
I think even when your two teams aren't playing, or when your team isn't playing, it's hard not to. You're like, oh, come on. But no, that's fun, and it's something. The crowd can really make your broadcast. I've noticed.
Yep.
When volleyball would play games in the Gratian gym, and you have that, that roof is a lot tighter. It's a tighter building, so you see the bleachers lined up in the bubble. It would maybe look like there were 100 people there, and it would be kind of spotty. But the fact that they're packed, and it makes it such a great atmosphere. And certainly something I've realized is a crowd can make your broadcast, and they can help you kind of seize the moment when you're calling in. You kind of let that crowd do their job.
I think we did a good job this year when you talk about volleyball of the locations of those matches.
Yes.
The 3 or the 4 they held over at the bubble, brought in big crowds, and that gym can get loud too, right? If you have the right amount of people.
Absolutely.
And so those were really fun matches. But then the smaller matches where you're maybe not going to bring as big of a crowd, when you put them in Gratian, you're right. That crowd can affect the game as much as they affect your broadcast. And so, it's just, I think, having a crowd mic is so important because that's just another way to translate the excitement and the atmosphere from that gym over to your listeners and your viewers.
Yeah, absolutely. And even you talk about professional sports, just that crowd pop.
Yeah.
And then you have that signature call with it. By no means am I saying I have a signature call. But if you have that crowd pop and then the call, it just makes the moment infinitely better.
I think back to, I believe it was Al Michaels' Miracle on Ice, 1980.
Oh, yes.
The actual call of the end of that game, if you listen to it, I feel like he's so faint because the crowd is so loud at the end, and that just sticks with me. It's like he's fighting. He's not fighting, but he's staying at the right level where the crowd really shines through in that last 10, 15, 20 seconds of that hockey game.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree with you. And then, a lot of people, say Joe Buck doesn't do enough for the game, but I think he lets the crowd kind of or the moment speak for itself, is what I think. And again, you're going to have your announcers that are, screaming over the crowd, and there's some announcers that just let the crowd do the work. And there's no wrong way to do it. It's just the emotion of the moment and kind of how they choose to approach that situation. So it's certainly dependent on the style. It's certainly dependent on the moment, and things, in the moment, even some broadcasters. I know there's a story in Edmonton, one of the Oilers radio broadcasters, when the Oilers were a dynasty in the 80s. I think he ended up swearing on the air. So again, emotion kind of gets to you, but I don't think that would happen to either of us.
Well, I hope not. Might have to reevaluate your employment at that point.
That's right. You have the opportunity to cut this podcast. You have the opportunity to cut my mic on the broadcast, but you haven't yet. So I thank you for that. Let's get into a bit of content creation because you had I don't want to say you had a podcast, but you did an Inside Athletics show. I don't know if you were calling it a podcast or I'm not sure. But you had Jim Dew on it. He was former
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Vikings baseball and football head coach.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yep.
Okay, I got that right. Thinking back to my Corey Anderson episode. Is that something you're going to do more of with some of these figures, or was it just kind of that one opportunity there with Coach Dew?
Yeah, so the basis of that one, right, was we were doing a story for the Alumni Bulletin magazine about Jim Dew and this line of successful coaches that initially played or student coached under him, and now they've gone on to be successful college coaches. And so that was the gist of it. But we wanted to get his thoughts on all that, but then we thought, man, he's got a lot more to share as well. So let's just sit down and record the interview. And Jim has got so many stories, he's got so many names that he's connected with, and just he was a big part of Viking history over the last 50 years. So we just wanted to get some of that on film and record that essentially. And I would agree that's as part of this my transition into this new role. I took on kind of the operation of this studio and some of the live event production on campus that was previously housed with technology services. And so I think eventually we're looking for more ways to utilize this studio and utilize this equipment to tell more stories. And your podcast is a perfect example of that, where now we're able to touch base with students, staff, faculty on this campus, let them tell a little bit more about their stories, who they are, and just puts more of a face on the university when you can make those personal connections and hear those personal stories. So yeah, definitely things like that we want to do a better job of going forward. We're in talks with I3G Media of kind of restarting a coaches show potentially, where we can get our head coaches and some players on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to talk more about Viking athletics. So that's something we're looking at as well. But we're missing the boat if we don't keep up on some of that new content. And so, yep, definitely going forward, we want to try to work in more of that.
For sure. And I think the appetite for this kind of content and then also like live streams has exponentially grown. I don't know if it was a COVID thing or whatnot, but talk about kind of, the growth of just... First, I want to talk most about the growth of athletic live streaming, because until I came to college to play sports, I had never really seen or heard of schools that would stream all their games and in the type of way that they were doing, as far as like some schools have camera angles down the baselines,
right?
Or for football there's one in the back of the end zone, one on showing the whole field, and it's evolving. So talk about that evolution of just athletic live streaming, and then we'll obviously get into just kind of content as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about content as a whole. Sports information director, for example, changed so much from my first year to my last year because of, you talk about social media, but also that athletic live stream, right? It was just kind of a small thing when we initially started. They were doing it for select, I believe it was football and basketball events when I first started. They were able to live stream. And so we've gone through some evolution where we've changed some platforms, we've changed equipment, different ways to work scoreboards on there, broadcasters, and we've gotten to the point where we don't charge people. I was always against that. We did it 1 or 2 years, and the amount of people that would actually pay to watch, I felt like we were doing ourselves a disservice, putting all that work into doing a good broadcast, and then only having 40 people watch it when we could have 400 people watch it. Right. So, and then I think we also owed it a little bit to the families of our athletes. They're paying to come to school here, right? They're getting scholarships, obviously, to play, but I think that's just an easy way to help build those connections with families of your athletes, but also alumni. They wouldn't pay $10 to watch a whole game, but they might check in for a half if it's a close game, and they don't have to pay anything.
Right.
So I think that's been really good for us to help keep people connected to their teams, and then also allow our student athletes to show off, right? Have what they're doing be available for their families and friends that can't make it to the games on a regular basis. Yeah, we've done a better job. We're not obviously at the D1 level, but I think we've always been towards the top of schools in our region and schools in our our level of competition as far as the live stream. We've been doing HD for a long time. Within the last 4 to 5 years, we've really made it a priority to have a broadcaster on every game that we can, right? So we've started paying, even if the radio station, when the radio station covers, right, we're able to pull their audio. We have a good partnership with them, put their audio on top of our broadcast. And then we got to the point where we would pay someone to come in and be the play-by-play guy if we weren't able to have the radio station there. Right, so then we were getting a broadcast on all non-radio games as well.
Sounds like what might happen tomorrow night.
And then this past year, before I changed roles, kind of instigated by Dennis McCulloch and Corey Anderson on campus, but we actually entered into a streaming agreement with I3G Media, which is really the local radio station in town, where they would actually produce the live stream, the official VCSU live streams, and provide the broadcasters and hire the camera people. We would get some ad space on there like we had been doing on our broadcasts, and then obviously they would get to sell ad space to local businesses. And I think that's been very successful for the most part. Ryan Cunningham and his crew, you're part of it, do a great job on getting our events covered and putting out good broadcasts. So we've been very happy with that. So yeah, it's evolved from, a one camera, a lot of times no broadcaster, no scoreboard, just showing the video essentially to they do a pretty good production now.
Right. No, 100%. And even in my 4 years here, I've just seen like the evolution of, the scoreboard has changed and,
Right.
The quality's improved and, we've at least from, I did a little bit of broadcasting last year, but even this year, we're always fine tuning things. We're always looking for better ways to do things. And, it's fun. And obviously, it helps parents that can't come. Obviously, my family's from very, very far away, so they're not making the 16-hour trek every game.
Yep.
But, even for families that, when the teams go on the road, right, they can't make the trip, and they can watch the away broadcast as away fans, obviously. So it's helpful for sure.
You talk about baseball, that's probably a prime example of the way things have evolved. When I first started, right, it wasn't an option to stream baseball. We didn't have the equipment, the setup in that booth to take care of at the home games. At a certain point, we invested in streaming, a wireless jetpack, right, that gets you internet. So we could actually go out to the field, we could stream games, even though there wasn't any hardwired internet out there. The quality, we'd have to step down the quality, so it wasn't full HD because, you're working on cellular internet. So we were limited somewhat on that. And then a few years ago, Eric Kringley from campus here, but also a member of the Valley City Baseball Board, he worked with Beck Communications to get hardwired internet installed at Charlie Brown Field in Valley City. Beck, great partnership, right? They donated all that, so they don't charge the Baseball Association for that. So now we're able to tap into that and put out a full HD broadcast. We've invested, like you said, in some scoreboard graphics. So it's changed a lot from no broadcast for baseball to, okay, we can do them, but they're not very good, to, okay, putting out a pretty decent broadcast now.
Yeah, and I know Ryan came on the road. It was my sophomore year. He came to Dakota State with the radio station, to cover the games, and it's just like, wow, like you never think this is going to be what it is. Like I know even now they're doing high school games. Like I know my high school games were never streamed,
Right.
but now they're streaming high school. So it's definitely evolving, and the content creation, and now in summer baseball leagues and in everything, there's some sort of recording. And then sometimes there's highlight packages that are made after. So it's certainly something that's evolved quickly, and something that is probably going to continue to evolve quickly because, again, as if there are athletes, there are people that are going to want to watch the games.
Yeah, you talk about highlight packages, right? Alyssa Thompson, she does those for us right now as part of her student employment under myself, and so she does a great job of the events that she can get out to, putting together a 1-minute highlight package afterwards, right? And we can share that out on social media. The Athletics, the current SIDs, they can use that as they want. Prior to that, we had Hopi Shizaka. She did a really good job. Mitchell Silkman, who was in kind of the video production role on campus for a couple of years, he did some top-notch work. And so, yeah, you're right. There's an appetite for that type of stuff, and we really got to work to keep doing that going forward.
Right on. Well, you know what? We're coming to the end of this. To be honest with you, this was probably the least I've actually covered of what I planned.
What else you got?
I got, what hobbies do you have?
Sports.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I grew up on a farm, obviously, right? So hunting and fishing, we did a lot of that. I don't get to do as much anymore, but when we do get home, my son and I like to go out with my dad and still do that. And we've done some fishing and hunting up here in the Valley City area as well. So that's a nice way to unplug a little bit.
Right.
So that's probably number one that I would say.
Yeah, growing up in a big city, hunting is foreign to me. Even some guys on the baseball team just love to go, just no phone, no nothing, just go out in nature, and something that maybe I should go along with one time just to try it out. But
hey, it's your last year here. Why
That's
not
right.
experience it? Have you gone ice fishing before?
I have not.
Do you have
but
some guys that go ice fishing?
Need to go ice
You
fishing.
should give it a
yes.
try. Yep.
Because that's apparently just you catch a fish or you don't. It doesn't matter. It's just fun time with everyone. So.
Right. You're out there hanging out with your buddies.
Right. I guess I'll finish on this question. Because no, you know what? Let's ask a couple fun questions. Favorite restaurant in Valley City? I asked it to everyone.
And it evolves right over
Yes.
the years, but right now a Valet taco shop is really good.
Yep.
We're a big fan of that type of food, and so yeah, they do a good job with that.
And then this is another question. I don't know if you answered it per se, but you kind of brought up some answers that I think. Favorite athlete could be past or present.
Yeah, I mean it's Kevin Garnett.
Okay, I was going to say Randy Moss.
He was good, but growing up, I was more into basketball, NBA.
Okay,
and Kevin
interesting.
Garnett was really a formative athlete for my fandom of Minnesota sports. So yeah, definitely bittersweet to see him win it with the Boston Celtics. Eventually
Yes.
get that championship after not really getting the help he deserved in Minnesota, but definitely still is cool to see him do that.
KG. Okay. Yeah. I was thinking Randy Moss. I know you're a baseball guy too, so I thought, okay, maybe there might be a baseball player mentioned, but I'll end with this question.
The Twins weren't very good.
Did they win a World Series?
So they won in 87 and 91.
Okay.
I was 5 years old in 91.
Okay,
right?
then yeah, you don't know what's going on.
I have memories, I think,
Right.
of sitting up watching those games and seeing Kirby Puckett and all those guys.
Right.
But, maybe those are memories I fabricated in my head after seeing highlights over the years. But then from then on, the Twins weren't very good
Yeah.
up until about the early 2000s. They started to get competitive again after the talk of contraction, when they were potentially going to be dissolved. So, yeah, it wasn't when I was really forming my fandom. Huge Twins fan now. That's up there with the Vikings. My wife and I, we try to get to a Twins game. Several years we've gone to the season opener at Target Field.
That's cool.
That's something you need to experience, right?
Season opener, okay.
That's 40 degrees, 36 degrees sometimes in Minnesota, and that place is packed. 39,000 people. It's not baseball weather, but it is baseball atmosphere, right? It almost feels like postseason. It's just such a joyous atmosphere for the start of baseball season.
Well, if you want to experience that on a budget, come to a Valley City baseball game because you'll get that weather, but there won't be that many people. My final question for you would be, what do you enjoy most about working at VCSU?
I mean, there's a lot of benefits to this job. This university, this community, my wife and I, we have 2 kids, 10 and 8 now. We've just become part of it. And that's, I think that's probably the number one thing is you're not just a person. I know that sounds cliche, but you're a part of a community, the VCSU community, and people here are so friendly, and there's just a group of people that have been here a while. They're going to stay here a while. And so I think that it's the people you've met, the relationships you've made. At the end of the day, working sports for 11 years, how can you complain about that?
That's right.
You're getting paid to go out and cover sports, and so that was great. Meet a lot of coaches. There's been a lot of people that have come and gone too. Coaches, it's really rare to get someone to stay for a long time, and we've had several of those, but there's a lot of turnover in that profession as well as they look to move up or move to different areas. So that's relationships you've made, and then try to maintain some of those when they do move away. But yeah, I think really it's the life that this university has allowed us to make here in Valley City at the end of the day. It's been really great for us.
I love that answer. Well, Mark, thank you for coming on the podcast. I know I had to Did I congratulate you on your Difference Maker award on this
thank you.
podcast?
Appreciate
oh my
it.
gosh. If I would have filmed this podcast without congratulating you, I would have been very upset because that was one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on, because obviously you do some great work for this university, and I've worked closely with you this semester, and hopefully will next semester too, continuing to pump out this podcast. But Mark, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate having you here. I have weights in 8 minutes, so Coach Brad, I'm coming. As Kevin Garnett would say, anything is possible.
Anything is possible.
So thank you, Mark, for being here. And yeah, this has been episode 7 of Viking Voices.
Sounds great.